Hi everyone! Welcome back to another Facebook Live with Arizona Science Center. My name is Emma, and today we have a fun activity to learn a little bit more about our natural world around us. We're going to be talking about some animals. So we are going to find out a little bit about a group of animals called reptiles. So first of all, we're going to be talking about what is a trait. Do any of you remember? What is a trait? What is a trait? So a trait is something about a person, a plant, an animal, a thing that kind of describes what they are. It's something that makes them unique. An example is a trait about me is that I have blonde hair. That's something that's used to describe me. It's a trait about myself. We can actually use traits of animals to group them into different groups. So the special group of animals that we're talking about today are those reptiles. So we're gonna learn what are the traits of a reptile, and then we're gonna put our to the test and build and design our own reptile. I'm super excited about it. Throughout the video, if you have any questions or comments for me, make sure you put it in the comments so I can see and answer any questions that you have. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is find out what traits a reptile has. That way, when you see an animal, you'll be able to start thinking about what are those traits, and you'll know whether or not it's a reptile. The first one I have for you is, hi Juliet, thanks for joining us. The first one I have is a picture of a lizard skeleton. We're specifically looking that the lizard has this really nice backbone. So reptiles are vertebrates. That means they have backbones. Do we as humans have backbones? We do. So that's something that we as humans have in common with reptiles, is that we have a backbone. Reptiles have a backbone. They are vertebrates. So that's one trait of a reptile. Now, what do you think a reptile's skin feels like? You can feel your own skin and feel what ours feels like. It's really smooth. We have skin. What do you think a reptile's skin is like? So, yes, so Papa, Nate, that's a great point. These are just basic characteristics that we can use to overall get a good idea of reptiles, but in nature, nothing's perfect. So not every reptile is going to fit into all of these traits, but most of them will have a lot of these traits, and that'll help us identify it. But that's a great point. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so while our skin is very smooth and soft, reptiles are going to have scales. Most reptiles are going to have scales or a hardened shell like a turtle that'll help protect them. Do we have scales as humans? No. Do your dogs have scales? No. And dogs and humans are both mammals, so that makes reptiles different than us. They have scales while mammals do not. Okay, next trait. So the next trait of our reptiles is that reptiles are going to lay hard-shelled eggs or have a little leathery. So reptiles are going to lay eggs most of the time. So most reptiles are laying eggs. Did you come from an egg? Nope. Most mammals give a live birth, but our reptiles lay eggs. Perfect. So now we know that reptiles have a backbone, they're vertebrates, their skin is scaly, and they lay eggs. My next trait is about their blood. So we are warm-blooded. That means that our body regulates our own temperature. Humans should be about 98.6, and we're gonna maintain that temperature even if it's hot outside, even if it's cold. Reptiles can't do that. Reptiles are what's known as cold-blooded. So this is a picture of a frog. A frog is not a reptile, but that's the example I have. That means they can't regulate their own body temperature. If it's warm outside, they're gonna be warm, but if it's cold, they're gonna be cold. That's why you see snakes laying out in the sun, because they gotta warm themselves up. So our reptiles are cold-blooded. And last trait I wanna talk about is how they breathe. How do you think a reptile breathes? This isn't a trick question, don't worry. I would never try to trick you. So reptiles are gonna have at least one lung. We have lungs in our body as well, because we breathe air out on land. So reptiles are gonna have lungs. They're not gonna be able to breathe underwater with gills. They're not fish. So we know that our reptiles have lungs so they can breathe air. They are cold-blooded, so they like to be out in the warm sun so they can stay warm. They lay eggs, and they have scales. They also have a backbone. They are vertebrates. Can any of you think of what's an example of a reptile? We've talked about what the traits are, but can you animals that are reptiles? You can put it in the comments if you think you know any reptile examples. I'm gonna give you a second to type. I'm thinking of examples too in my head. What animals are examples of reptiles? One of my favorites is a crocodile. A crocodile is a kind of reptile. They spend a lot of time in the water swimming around, but they got those lungs, they can't breathe underwater. And they are a reptile. Another example is a lizard. Awesome, so now that we know what the traits of a reptile is, it's time for us to design and build our own reptile. So for this, you can use whatever kind of materials that you have at home. I'm gonna use for the base of my reptile a toilet paper roll. That's gonna be my base, but you can use whatever you have. I also have this bubble wrap because I wanna make sure that my reptile has some scales, and I don't wanna paint them all individually. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put some paint onto my bubble wrap, grab my paintbrush, just spread that around, maybe move it around like this, so I get my bubble wrap nice and covered, because I need to make sure that my reptile that I'm designing has those traits of a reptile. So I'm giving my reptile scales. So if I just put that bubble wrap on, give it a nice squeeze, take it off, and now I'm left with this really nice scale pattern. You can use whatever materials that you have at home though to design your own reptile, but let's make sure that we are thinking about what makes a reptile, so we're gonna use those traits. Okay, so now I have the body of my reptile. It is nice and scaly and green. So now I got to design the rest of it. I want to give my reptile some eyes so it can see. So I have some googly eyes. I'm gonna give my reptile some googly eyes. As I do that, I'm just gonna glue them on. I'm gonna read, we have a new comment. Any preschool K book suggestions for fall here in the Sonoran Desert? You know, we don't really experience fall quite like the other places in the world in the desert, so that is a great question. I I don't know any off the top of my head, but I can see if I can find some for you later on. Thank you for the question. So I'm giving my reptile some eyes so it can see. Now remember, our reptiles have a backbone, so I'm going to take this pipe cleaner and I'm going to put it inside of my reptile and just attach it on so I know that it has a backbone. Yep, that's its nice little backbone in there. And then I decided that my reptile is going to be a legless lizard. So it's not going to have any legs. And a legless lizard is a real thing. So if you've never seen one before, I suggest you look it up. And then I think I want my legless lizard to be a little sparkly. So I'm just going to put on some glue. Put some glue on because my legless lizard is going to shine out in the sun when it's getting itself warm. So I'm going to put some glitter on it. I specifically made sure I had a plate so I wouldn't make a mess. And now my legless lizard is very beautiful and shiny. And now I've designed my own reptile. He is mine, he is very special, and I'm sure he's going to be different than the one that you create. But we know that the reptile you create is going to be similar to mine because they're going to share the same traits. We're going to make sure that they have scales, that they have a backbone, it's going to lay an egg, and that it's cold-blooded. I would love to see what you design. So after you take some time to design and create your own reptile, take a picture of it and leave it in the comments. I'll check back later to see what you all created. I'm excited to see it. Thank you all for joining me today for the Arizona Science Center Facebook Live. Come on down to the Arizona Science Center and visit us to learn more fun science or connect with us online at azscience.org. Thank you all so much for joining me on this lovely Friday. I hope you have a great day. Bye.